Now that we have seen and discussed role attribute configurations, let us now see what role methodology means and why you need to configure it, and how you can configure it to suit your enterprise needs to automate risk-free role creation. Now, the role creation process consists of um, predefined methodology actions and the methodology steps associated with those actions. So, and the steps then create a methodology that guides you through the process of defining, generating, and testing a role during the role creation process. And based on the steps, you can tell which phase of the role creation process a role is in, right? So, so in Business Role Manager, BRM, the role creation process consists of some predefined methodology steps, such as the definition phase, risk analysis phase, and so on. Let us quickly see where it is, what we mean by these predefined methodology steps. So let's go to NWBC. Expand this. Go to Access Management and click on Role Maintenance. Okay, so let's go and start creating the process, see, of creating a role. So let's say when you create a role, so you see the steps here, these are the different phases that the SAP default role methodology provides to you. So you can define a role, then you have to maintain, then you analyze the risks, right? Access risk. Then if you want to derive a role, you can derive a role and then a request approval. You can get the role approved, then generate the role, and then also maintain or testing, right? So there are about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 phases that SAP gives you as a default phases in the role creation process. Okay, so each of this role methodology that you have, what it does is actually enforces a process flow for the role creation and maintenance operation. Okay, and each of this phase you will have the options for maintaining various attributes that you had created, right? That you have configured. So we'll see what each attribute, okay, how to when we start creating a role. Now this methodology, provides a framework to leverage rules to dynamically select a methodology from available list of methodologies based on your role attributes. So SAP, what it means is that you can have multiple role methodologies, and one role methodology for a single role, another methodology for, let's say, business roles, for example, right? And if there are any special type of criteria in your organization that need some special type of approvals outside of the normal approval process or real role creation process, you can create a different methodology based on that approach. So this role methodology allows customers to document and enforce a well-defined role creation process based on the organization's policies. Okay, so for example, right, an organization you may have in your organization, you may want to enforce risk analysis and approvals for all rules that belong to a specific functional area, like maybe for finance, you may want to have a a specific approval process or methodology for that. For example, another example would be for roles that are classified as sensitive, and the organization policy may state that those roles must be approved by the department head before the role is approved by the role owner. So based on your requirements, on your scenarios, you can create different role methodologies. And using this role methodology function, rules can be created accordingly to the requirements that can select the specific methodology. Now, SAP gives you 7 steps in the role methodology, in the default role methodology. But it's not necessary that, you need to use all 7. Because let's say you don't have the data concept implemented in your place, in your organization, you do not want to have this phase. So you can customize your own, create your own methodology and remove these, the ones that you think are not needed. Okay, the steps that you don't need. Now, the role methodology, like I said, right, enforces process flow and maintenance in more controlled and uniform way to perform sequence of activities involved in role creation or maintenance process. Okay, so these steps are basically, guide you through the role creation process by using the guided procedures. Now, if you have, different role methodologies created, like I said, right, one for normal role creation process, and you could have another methodology for business role creation, or you may have another methodology for sensitives role creation process where a department head has to give his approval before a role owner can approve, right? So what role methodology should be, followed? You can define that, you can, by combining with something called as something called as a condition group and a BRF plus configuration. Okay, so to leverage the rules based on role attributes to dynamically select a methodology from the available list of methodologies. Okay, so let us go and now define a role methodology for, let's say, for our single roles. Okay, so under role management, execute define methodology processes and steps. Now, let's go back. Keep in mind that you have by default 7 steps, right, that SAP gives you. Let's close this. And the default one is the active, right? Default methodology is the active one. Now, let us click on new entries, okay? And let us define our own methodology based on what we are going to see. So click on new entries, and let's say the sequence was now 1 for the default one. Let's take 2. Okay. Now methodology status, you can inactivate or activate the methodology processes. Okay, and you can have only one default methodology applicable at any given point of time. And dynamically, if you want to change the methodologies based on what type of role you're creating, you'll have to use BRF plus rules. You have to configure something in BRF plus and then use MSMT to utilize that flow, okay, methodology. So let's say you're going to give a description for this saying, let's give methodology or single roles. Roles and composite roles. Okay. And let's copy the same thing here. Click on save. System will prompt you for a transport request. If you want to create a new one, you can create a new one or continue with what you already have. Now, once you have created this methodology process, now you have to include the steps within the process. Okay, so the first step, let's click on new entries, sequence number 1. So let's take number 1. What is the steps, right? So how many steps do we have? We have 7 steps. So you need to be very careful in logically defining this methodology, okay? Meaning you need to be very careful as to what are the sequential steps that you would want to follow while creating the or maintaining the rules. Okay, so the very first step that you would do is anyway, you know, by default will be a defining a rule, right? So take step number 1. Okay, so after defining a rule, what should be the next step, right? So let's go to step. So be logical in defining the steps, okay? Now, second step would be to maintain authorizations, right? So click on maintain authorizations because you're going to add transaction codes and then maintain the authorizations, right? So click on maintain authorization. The third step, what will be the third step? Let's assume, you know, we are going to implement the derived role concept. So let's select derived roles, okay? Now, before generating the authorization, the choice is yours, okay? For example, number 4, whether you would like to analyze the risks before generating the rules, okay? That could be another, so that could be the step. Or you want to totally ignore the analyzing risk, right? Depends on you, okay? Depends on what your policy is. So you can skip 4 if you want to, analyze risks if you want to, and directly go to request approval. Now, if you want to go through request approval, you'll have to make sure that you are implementing MSMP is configured for you. Okay, because approval notification has to go to a role owner or a department owner depending on what methodology you're going to follow. But we are not going through the MSMP process right now, so we are not going to choose this. But we would like to, you know, analyze the risks and ensure that the roles that we create are risk-free, correct? So let's select analyze, do risk analysis before we generate the roles, or we want to finalize the roles, right? So next process, the next step in the methodology would be, so I want to skip, I don't want request approval because I'm not doing that. And we are not implementing MSMP. Or through that, we are not going through those steps now. So next is after the roles, authorizations are maintained, the risk analysis is done, you would like to generate the roles, right? Now, the last step that is there is the maintain test cases. So I'm not going to maintain this test cases also. Okay, now save it. Now, before I save it, right, let's go back again. I saved it. So our role creation process, we are going through, we are going to go through these 5 steps. Okay. Now, you could do a risk analysis after a generation if you want to. It depends on what sequence that you want to follow in your role methodology. Okay, so let us go back quickly and click on role creation again and see again how many steps we have. So by default, SAP has 7 steps, right? All the 7 steps are maintained. Okay, so I'm going to close this. Okay, now let's go back to SAP and then why are we still, see, we created our own methodology and we saved it, right? But why do we still have, why did we just still see 7 steps in access control? Let's go back. Okay, let's go back. One more step. So now you have two methodologies, right? One is the default methodology and the second one is the one that you just created. But why did you still have the 7 steps showing up? That is because this checkbox, right? So you're utilizing the default one so far, right? Now let us uncheck this and check this, okay? And now save it. Okay, now let's go back to our access control and let's go and create. Okay, now you see you have only 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps that you defined in your methodology. Okay, now this ticket number, let's quickly see why are you getting this ticket number again and again, right? We are going to use this because a good process would be to document as much as possible while you're creating a role or maintaining role. So documentation is key for a lot of reasons. So let's go back. So the reason you're getting that ticket is because of one of the configuration parameters. So let's go back. Let's go to configuration parameters quickly and take a look at what did we maintain the other day. So we maintained some parameters which will start with 3000, right? So role management parameters start with all 3000. So one of them was related to what? Ticket number is required for after authorization data changes, right? And what was the dependency or a parallel parameter for this? It was 3040, right? It says ticket number is required for all role changes and the value that we gave here is yes. Now if you say no here, let us see what happens. Okay, quickly. Do we still get the ticket? That box for ticket entering the ticket number, let's see that. Okay, so let's close this and redo it again. See, now you don't get it, right? So again, the configuration parameters, the way you set it up, your tools are going to behave accordingly. Okay, so I'm going to put an yes here because ideally, a good practice would be to enter the ticket number while creating the role itself. But if you don't want, because the ticket number is already entered in 3008, I can say no now. Okay, so it depends on when you want that ticket number to be entered. Okay, I'm going to say no here. So, all right, let's go back to role methodology again quickly. All right, so we go back to role methodology. So we created one role methodologies for single roles, right? Now let's assume, you have implemented MSMP and, for business role scenario, you want to go for an upload process because a business role is a role that only exists only in the BRM side of the system. And then it is a container for all the technical roles, meaning the composite roles and the single roles from different environments. Like business role can contain roles from ECC systems. It can contain composite roles from ECC or roles from BI system or roles from HANA, system. You can you can combine all of these roles into one business role and assign that business role to users. Okay, so you can say business role is like a composite role in BRM that you create or utilize when you have a position-based or a job title-based security strategy in place. Okay, so when your requirement is for assigning role based on somebody's job title. Okay, so in ECC you could create a composite role for that, but a composite role limitation is that you cannot assign a composite role within a composite role. You can only do single roles, right? So in business role, it's not that. You can assign a composite role into a business role also. All right, so let's go through the steps for second, another example for our role methodology. Let's say we say this one same. Let's say we say is alternative, or let's say business role methodology. Okay. Let's copy the same in the long description. Save it. Okay. Now put it in a transport and now double click on this. Now click on new entries. Step 1. What do we do? It's basically the same steps, right? You define the role. That's the first step always, right? Second step, okay, so if it's a business role methodology, right, you don't need to maintain authorizations, for example, right? There is no concept of maintaining authorizations in a business role. There is no concept probably of a derived rule, right? So let's not do that. So the second one would be risk analysis, right? So if you're assigning single roles and composite roles from different systems, it's possible that risks may creep in into the user's access. So you might want to be careful with the risks. Okay, so you pick number 4 because we want to analyze the risks. All right. So after that, what would you need, right? So let's say risk. Let's take the next phase. What do we need? So you analyze the risks, and maybe this time you want to get the approvals, right? So let's select approvals. So get the approvals, right? Request approval. Okay. Now let's say you want to be very careful and see if test cases have to be created. Testing is done. So let's select maintain test cases, right? So for a business role creation, we are saying that they can define the roles and then they can do what do you call risk analysis, then they can approve, and then we can see are saying if they want to test, if the test cases are created, we can have them tested. Okay. All right. So when you save it, okay. All right. So go back. So it is inactive. That's fine. We're not activating it. Now, if I make it this one, you can say, like I said, right, you can have only one methodology, which can be a default methodology. Okay. So let's select the one that we already had and let's make it active too. Okay. Now, depending on your requirements, using BRF plus and MSMP, BRF plus rules, condition groups and all that, you can dynamically use this role methodologies. Okay, so save it. This is how you create a role methodology. Okay, like once again, you can create as many methodologies as you want, depending on your business scenarios or requirements. Okay. Now so we have now completed all the configuration steps that we need so far for implementing a BRM for creating roles. Now let us go and see how we create roles now.